The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. I was in my recliner, feet up, watching the evening news. Same spot I sat in every night since Catherine passed. Gideon walked in, still wearing his work boots, tie loosened, face red like he'd been arguing with someone the whole drive home. "Turn that off," he said. Not asked, said. I glanced at him. "It's the 7 o'clock news, Gideon, same as every night." "I don't care what it is." He crossed the living room and snatched the remote right out of my hand, hit the power button himself. The screen went black. "You sit in that chair all day, don't you? Don't work, don't help, don't do a damn thing but watch TV in a house you didn't even build." I built half of that house, room by room, with my own 2 hands, but I didn't say that. I just looked at him. "Rough day?" I said, instead, keeping my voice level. "Yeah, rough day. You know what's rough? Busting my ass all day and coming home to my father-in-law parked in the good chair like he's got nowhere to be, like the world owes him something." He threw the remote onto the couch. "You're a leech, man, you know that? Sitting here collecting a pension while the rest of us actually work." 18 months. 18 months my daughter and her husband had been living under my roof, and this was the thanks I got? Called a leech in my own living room by a man who hadn't held a steady job the whole time he'd been here? "I own this house," I said quietly. "Paid it off in 2008. You're the one living here for free." That landed. I saw it land. His jaw tightened. "For now," he said. "That's about to change. I got a real opportunity coming. Gonna make more in 90 days than you made your whole last year teaching shop class. Then we'll see who's the leech." He stormed off toward the kitchen, still muttering. I sat there in the dark living room, screen off, my own house gone quiet and strange around me. Hannah came home an hour later, tired from a 12-hour shift, scrubs still on. She found me in the same chair. "Hey, Dad." Mechanical, tired, not really seeing me. "Your husband called me a leech tonight, in my own living room." She sighed, the kind of sigh that told me she'd heard this before and didn't want to referee it again. "He's just stressed, Dad. Work's been hard on him. Can you just not push his buttons? He's trying." Trying, that word again. Everything Gideon did lately got wrapped up in that word, like it excused whatever came out of his mouth. I didn't argue. I never did anymore. I just nodded and let her walk past me into the kitchen, and I sat there thinking about the man who used to fix radios and repair engines and never once needed anyone to call him a leech to feel small. 3 days later, Gideon came to me with a folder of papers and a business opportunity that was going to change everything, he said. "Make it up to me," he said. I should have remembered how he'd looked at me over that dead TV screen. I should have remembered that a man who calls you a leech one week doesn't suddenly respect you the next. I signed anyway, told myself I was doing it for Hannah. 3 weeks later, my phone rang. Sarah Newman, loan officer, Community First Bank, same bank Catherine and I had used for 40 years. "Mr. Pitt, I need you to come in tomorrow. There's something on this loan file you need to see." "What kind of something?" She paused just long enough for my stomach to drop before she even answered. "The collateral on this note isn't just a lien, Mr. Pitt. It's second position, filed a week before you even signed. Someone else already borrowed against your house." I stood in my quiet living room, TV still dark, and understood all at once that the ground under my feet wasn't mine anymore. If you've ever been called worthless in your own home by someone you took in, tell me where you're watching from and rate this story 1 to 10. I need to know you're still with me, because it gets worse before it gets better. I didn't sleep that night. Sarah Newman's voice kept looping in my head. Second position, filed a week before you signed. By 11, I gave up pretending rest was coming. Gideon and Hannah's bedroom door light was still on down the hall. Low voices, the kind you can't make out but can tell are arguing about something. Let them argue. I had my own work to do. I'd taught shop for 40 years. You learn to read a machine by taking it apart, piece by piece, patient, careful, no wasted moves. A man's not so different. I just needed the right access. Gideon's laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, plugged in, glowing faint blue in the dark. He never closed it all the way. Never thought he needed to, because to him, I was just the old man in the recliner who didn't know how to work a smartphone, let alone find anything on a computer. I touched the trackpad. Screen lit up. No password. I almost laughed. 40 years fixing engines and wiring radios, and here was a man who thought locking a bedroom door was security enough. I started with his email. Found the loan paperwork first, the same file Sarah had pulled up for me. Second position lien, filed 8 days before I ever put my name on anything. Gideon had walked into that bank with my house as collateral before he'd even shown me a single page. Then I found the messages between him and somebody named Frank Del Vecchio. No last name on the flip company. No address on the East Side project he'd promised was guaranteed. Just Gideon and Frank, going back 3 months, talking about moving the funds through and closing this out before anybody starts asking where the property is. There was no property. There was no flip. I scrolled further and found the truth laid out plain as a wiring diagram. Gideon had borrowed against my house twice, once through the loan I signed, once through a separate line he'd opened using paperwork with my name on it that I'd never seen. And both loans were headed the same place, not into any real estate deal, into an account with Frank's name on it, and from there, gone. He wasn't flipping houses. He was flipping my house and Hannah's future right along with it, and he'd been building this for months before he ever called me a leech in my own living room. My hands were steady. I photographed every screen, loan documents, the email thread with Frank, a spreadsheet titled Exit 90 Days that laid out in Gideon's own words when he planned to stop making payments and let the whole thing default, walk away clean while the bank came after the house. 43 photographs. I backed them up 3 ways before I let myself feel anything at all. Then I found the one that stopped me cold. It wasn't about money. It was an email from 2 weeks back. Subject line, Hannah, timeline. Gideon writing to Frank, once the funds clear, I'm out. She doesn't know yet. Easier if she finds out after, not before. Old man's house was never the point. She was just the paperwork that got him into my house. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't inventing what it said. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was planning to disappear the second the money cleared, leave my daughter standing in the wreckage of a house that wasn't hers anymore, married to a man who'd never intended to stay past the payout. I sat in that dark kitchen with the laptop glow on my face and understood something Sarah Newman's phone call hadn't told me. This wasn't a bad investment. This wasn't a son-in-law who'd gotten in over his head. This was a plan, built slow and patient, and my daughter wasn't the woman he loved. She was the paperwork that got him into my house. A door opened down the hall. Footsteps. I closed the laptop fast, left it exactly where I'd found it, and slipped into the hallway shadow before Gideon rounded the corner heading for the bathroom. Water running. I held my breath against the wall until it shut off again, until his footsteps faded back toward the bedroom. I didn't go back to bed. I sat at my kitchen table with my phone in my hand, 43 photographs safe in 3 different places, and I thought about the folder he'd handed me at that table 3 weeks ago, and how he'd said, "This is how we get ahead," and smiled at me like we were partners. At 6 a.m., I picked up the phone and called the one man who'd know exactly what to do with what I'd found. A retired cop, 40 years on the Erie force, a man who used to be my neighbor before he moved across town. Kelly answered on the second ring, voice already awake, like old cops never really sleep. "Mario, it's 6 a.m. This better be good." "Kelly, it's about Gideon, and it's worse than money." The line went quiet. Then, "Tell me everything." So I did, and by the time I finished, Kelly wasn't sleepy anymore.
Kelly showed up at 7.
still in his work jacket, like he hadn't stopped to change. Retired 8 years now, but you could still see the cop in the way he walked into my kitchen, straight to the table, straight to business. "Show me," he said. I laid out my phone. 43 photos, the loan documents, the email thread with Frank Del Vecchio, the line that still made my stomach turn every time I read it. She was just the way in. Kelly read it twice, jaw tight, saying nothing until he set the phone down. "Mario, this isn't just fraud. This is elder financial exploitation, and depending on how that second loan got filed, it might be forgery too. You need a lawyer before you do anything else, today." He already had someone in mind. Emma Voss, worked family and elder law downtown, used to consult on cases back when Kelly was still on the job. He called her from my kitchen table. 9:30, she said. "Come in with everything." By 9, I was in her office, 43 photos backed up in 3 places, folder in my lap like it was the only solid thing left in my hands. Emma Voss was maybe 50, sharp eyes, the kind of calm that comes from having seen worse than what you're about to tell her. She went through it slow. The original loan, the second lien filed 8 days before I signed, the Frank Del Vecchio account, the exit spreadsheet. "Mr. Pitt, this is a clear pattern: inducement by deception, unauthorized second lien, and what looks like planned default and fund diversion. In Pennsylvania, that's theft by deception, and given your age, it likely qualifies as financial exploitation of an elder adult under state law. That's a felony." She looked up at me. "We're going to move fast. First thing, you need to get back into that house and secure it before he knows you have any of this." "It's my house," I said. "I never lost the right to be in it." "Legally, no, but practically, if he suspects you know, he could try to hide assets, destroy records, or make things ugly at home. You need new locks today, before he gets back from work." Sarah Newman called while I was still in Emma's office. Community First had flagged something else overnight, an attempt to draw against the home equity line that morning, $600, declined only because the line was already maxed from the second loan Gideon had opened without me. Sarah froze everything on her end the second I told her what Emma and I had found. Fraud investigation opened, official, on paper, with a case number. By 11, I was standing in my own driveway with a locksmith named Tony, watching him pull the old front door lock free. 30 years he'd been rekeying houses in this town. He didn't ask questions, just worked, steady and quiet. Front door, back door, garage, basement, 4 points sealed by 1:30. "5 keys a set," Tony said, handing them. I gave one set to Kelly, right there in the driveway, without a word needed between us. The house felt different once the locks were changed. Quieter, but not the old suffocating quiet. This was mine again, every room of it. And for the first time in 18 months, I walked through my own living room without feeling like a guest. I spent the afternoon in the bedroom Gideon had turned into some kind of office, packed his things into 2 suitcases, careful, no anger in it, just methodical, the way you clear out a workspace at the end of a job. Found paperwork in his desk drawer I hadn't seen yet, a second bank he'd been dealing with, a car loan taken out under a business name that traced back to him. Photographed all of it, handed the drive to Kelly before 4 o'clock. Emma Voss called at 5 with news that made my hands go still. A protective order was already filed, hearing set for later in the week, and the fraud case had moved to the district attorney's desk faster than she'd expected, given the amount and my age. "This is serious enough that they're treating it with urgency, Mr. Pitt. That's good for you. It also means when he finds out, he's going to react badly. Be ready for that." By 6 o'clock, I was sitting in Catherine's old armchair by the front window, 2 packed suitcases by the door, 4 new locks holding, watching the driveway the way I used to watch it 40 years ago, waiting for Hannah to come home from school.
At 6:40, headlights swung into the driveway. Gideon's truck first, aggressive, too fast for a residential street. Hannah's car right behind it, slower, careful. I didn't move from the chair. I just listened. Car doors, footsteps on the porch, then the sound I'd been waiting for all afternoon. Metal scraping against metal, a key that didn't fit anymore, jammed hard into a lock that no longer knew it. "What the hell?" Gideon's voice, muffled through the door. "Keys are stuck." More jiggling, harder now. "Mine's not working either. Dad? Dad, are you home?" I sat still in the dark living room, watching their shadows shift against the porch light, listening to the confusion in my daughter's voice turn slowly into something else. The doorknob rattled hard enough to shake the frame. "Mario!" Gideon's voice, no longer confused, angry now. "Open this door right now!" I looked at the 2 suitcases waiting by the door, and I stood up.
I unlocked the deadbolt, but left the chain on. Opened the door 6 inches, just enough for them to see my face. Gideon's eyes dropped to the chain first, then snapped up at me, red already climbing his neck. "What did you do to the locks? This is my house." "No," I said, "it isn't. Never was." Behind him, Hannah stood frozen on the porch, purse still on her shoulder, scrubs still on from her shift. "Dad, what's going on? Why can't we get in?" "I know about the second loan, Gideon," I said. "I know about Frank Del Vecchio. I know about the exit plan. I know you were never planning to stay past the payout." His face changed fast, shock, then something harder underneath it. "You've been going through my stuff, you senile old—" "Careful," I said. "I've got 43 photographs and a fraud case number with your name on it. Careful what you say next." "Jason, what is he talking about?" Hannah's voice cracked. Wrong name. I almost corrected her out of habit before I remembered it didn't matter right now. "He's lying," he said, too fast. "He's confused, Han. This is exactly what I told you might happen. He's getting paranoid. We should have moved out weeks ago." "Read this," I said, and slid a printed page through the gap. The email. She was just the way in. Hannah picked it up, read it once, read it again. I watched her face go white, then still in a way that scared me more than the yelling would have. "Gideon," she said, very quiet. "Is this real?" "Han, that's not— You're misreading that. That's not what it means. It's your email. Your name is on it." Her hands were shaking. "She was just the way in. What does that mean, Gideon? Tell me what that means." He didn't answer. That silence told her everything the page already had. "You planned this," she said. "From the start. All of it." "Everything I did for us," he snapped, turning on her now, voice climbing. "You think I wanted to live in this old man's house, listening to him lecture me every damn day? I was building something, Han, for you." "For me?" Her voice broke wide open. "You forged loans against my father's house, and you were gonna leave the second the money cleared? That's not for me. That's for you." "You don't understand how any of this works," he said. "I understand you called him a leech in his own living room the same week you were stealing from him," she said, and something in her voice had gone cold and clear, like she was finally seeing him without the fog she'd been living in for 18 months. "I understand everything now." He grabbed for the door, shoved it hard against the chain. The frame rattled, but held. "This is insane. Open the door." "I suggest you step back," I said. "My neighbor's watching from her window, and assault is a crime." He looked past me, saw the curtain twitch 2 houses down, and something in him deflated just slightly, the performance cracking. "Fine," he said, "fine. I'm calling the cops. Tell them I'm holding my wife's belongings hostage." "Please do," I said. "I've got a fraud investigation with the district attorney's office and a protective order hearing on the calendar. Call whoever you want." Sirens actually did come 20 minutes later.
not because he called them, but because Kelly had already given the local precinct a heads up that a volatile confrontation might happen tonight, and a patrol car had been circling the block. 2 officers walked Gideon through his rights on my front lawn, while Hannah sat on the porch steps, the printed email still crumpled in her fist, crying the way you cry when 18 months of denial finally breaks apart at once. I stood in my doorway and watched them lead him to his truck instead of the cruiser. No arrest yet, just a warning to leave the property since the protective order hadn't been finalized by a judge. He got in, engine roaring too loud for the quiet street, and before he pulled away, he rolled the window down and looked straight at me. "This isn't over, old man. You'll regret this." He peeled out of the driveway. Hannah didn't go with him. She sat on my porch steps in the cold, and I sat down next to her, and neither of us said anything for a long while. At 11 that night, my phone rang. "Kelly, Mario, you need to see the news alert that just came through. The Del Vecchio account, the one Gideon's been feeding funds into, got flagged for a wire out tonight. Big one. If he's cashing out early, he knows the walls are closing in. That makes him unpredictable. You and Hannah both need to be careful tonight." I looked over at my daughter, finally asleep on the couch in her old room, safe under my roof for the first time in 18 months. Then, somewhere down the street, I heard an engine, too loud, too familiar, coming back.
The engine cut out 2 houses down. I moved to the window, phone already in my hand, Kelly's still on the line. "He's here," I said, low. "Truck's parked down the block, lights off." "Get Hannah up, lock the bedroom door. I'm 4 minutes out, and I'm calling it in as a possible violation of the protective order. That'll get a cruiser here faster than me." I woke Hannah gentle, no time to explain twice. She saw my face and understood before I said a word. We moved to the hallway together, and I put myself between her and the front door, the way I should have 18 months ago, the first time he raised his voice in my house. The porch light caught him coming up the walk, unsteady, weaving slightly, something in his hand catching the street light. Not a weapon I could name yet, just something heavy and wrong-shaped. "Gideon, stop!" I said it through the door, loud enough to carry. "Police are already on their way. Turn around now." "You ruined everything." His voice was thick, slurred at the edges. 40 years I've been planning to get out of nothing, and you had to go digging through my laptop like some has-been detective. This was supposed to be clean. It was never clean. You lied to my daughter and stole from an old man who trusted you. That's not a plan. That's a con. He hit the door once hard with whatever was in his hand. The chain held. Hannah flinched behind me but didn't run. "Dad, I already called Emma Voss's office. There's a recording line for exactly this. I'm calling it right now." Sirens turned onto the street before Gideon got a second swing in. 2 cruisers, lights washing red and blue across the porch. Kelly's truck right behind him, parked crooked at the curb because retired cops don't wait for permission to show up when it matters. The officers had him on the ground before he finished turning around. The thing in his hand, a tire iron it turned out, kicked clear across the driveway. Violation of a protective order, attempted property damage, and once Sarah Newman's fraud report and Emma Voss's documentation reached the responding officers by morning, a felony theft by deception charge sat next to his name as well, under Pennsylvania's elder financial exploitation statute. Given the dollar amount and my age, the DA's office moved on it fast. Hannah stood on the porch and watched him put in the back of the cruiser. She didn't cry this time. She just watched, arms crossed against the cold until the taillights turned the corner and were gone. "I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it, for not seeing it sooner." I said, "You saw it the second it mattered. That's what counts." 3 months passed. I'll tell you plainly, because that's how Kelly always told things to me.
Plain, no dressing it up. Gideon took a plea in February. 18 months county time, restitution ordered on both loans, 5 years probation once he's out. Frank Del Vecchio's part of the scheme is still working through the courts separately. Apparently, Gideon wasn't his only mark, just his most convenient one. Community First worked with Emma Voss to unwind the second lien entirely once the fraud was confirmed. The house is clear again, mortgage-free the way it was before any of this started. Hannah filed for divorce the week after the arrest, didn't hesitate once she had the truth laid out in black and white. She stayed in her old room for 2 months while she got back on her feet, working her shifts, going to a counselor twice a week, slowly turning back into the daughter I remembered, instead of the tired, distant woman who used to walk past me like I wasn't in the room. She's got her own apartment now, West Side, close to the hospital, visits twice a week. Last Wednesday, she brought takeout and we ate at the kitchen table like we used to before any of this, before Catherine passed, before Gideon ever walked through my door. I keep thinking about that first night when he called you a leech in the living room. I heard it. I was in the kitchen. I heard every word and didn't say anything. You were scared of him. That's not the same as not caring. I should have said something. You're saying it now. She smiled, small, the first real one I'd seen from her in almost 2 years. My garage still smells like solder and old wood. That Zenith radio sits finished on the shelf now, working fine, playing whatever old station comes through clearest. Some Saturdays I sit out there with the door up, radio going, and I think about how close I came to losing everything I built, not just the house, but the version of myself who still believed people were exactly who they said they were. I'm 70 years old. I taught shop class for 40 years, fixed things that other men gave up on, and it turns out the hardest repair job of my life wasn't a radio or an engine. It was learning, late in the game, that protecting the people you love sometimes means being the one who says no first. The house is quiet these days, not the old suffocating kind of quiet I lived in for 18 months, the good kind, the kind that means it's finally mine again.